Okay, awesome. So Patrick shared with me that we have a 50% healthcare executives and 50% VC. So I'll do my best to speak about this field in a way that I'm not going to burden you with medical jargon nor technical jargon per se. So I'll do my best to help you understand this field from a layman perspective, and also make sure that you will be inspired to research on your own merit. So for today, we're talking about affective computing, or also known as emotion AI. And we're going to be exploring opportunities within the landscape of affective computing, especially lasers on digital health. I put some selected past and present academic affiliations. You can see it by yourself. And if you want to talk with me or something, you can find me on LinkedIn or on X or Twitter at it's Kat Usop. All right, so for today, I broke the lecture into 3 modules, and I'll do my best to be concise and comprehensive in each part. So the first part is why, then how, then what. On the why, we're going to understand a very complex kind of interdisciplinary field by which we talk about the significance, the market, and gaps, and this is catering to folks within the venture capital realm. And then on the how, we're going to look at the landscape of health in terms of its trends, and especially innovation trends, and also in terms of prevalence of disease and chronic diseases, and also the origin story of affective computing and the state of the art in terms of the AI models that are out there being used, but not necessarily a product. So it's also an opportunity for developers in the group, whether now or at a later viewing, to explore further these frameworks and libraries. Obviously, this is an infant stage, so everything I say by now will be changing in a month or two, or even days by this acceleration of AI, right? So the last part is the what, and the what will encompass the use cases that are interesting in terms of its impact in the medical field, but at the same time, an opportunity for its commercial release and also marketability and viability. And in the pillars of concern, we really have to talk about the ethics, privacy, and regulations that are out there being developed as we speak, not necessarily for affective computing, but it's actually encompassing the whole idea of AI in medicine or AI in health. I hope that will be interesting for you to stick around. I'll do my best to concise so much information in so little time. So bear with me if I stutter sometimes. So let's uncover the why. And in a very simplistic manner, obviously, this is not saying everything, but it will ignite your imagination. There is so much gap between the provider and then the healthcare seeker, or the patient by which they're diagnosed, but healthcare seeker nevertheless. The gap is not just knowledge gap, which is we're still uncovering and needing to uncover more knowledge within the medical field as a clinical practice, but also the non-clinical applications of actually running medicine or running healthcare as a machine or as a system, but at the same time understanding what exactly the rare diseases, also brain health disorders, mental health disorders. I think there is someone. Okay, admit. I'm just clicking on admit. So the gap here. I'm gonna click on admit. Patrick, there's a lot of admit prompts, by the way. So it is significant because there's so much to unravel from an intellectual point of view, but also from the administrative or the business aspect of it. And also there's a need to improve existing systems, and also not only a need, but a kind of a driving force to implement and adopt. And that is one of the reasons why I'm a globetrotter. I do travel in seeking places where AI adoption in medical field, especially in the medical field, is happening as we speak. It is helpful to be part of a genesis of something that may not be of the same standardization like in the West or in the US, but it's really helpful to see how health consumers, patients, pre-patients actually adopt a certain solution that has been created locally, domestically, with the local need in mind. So that is one of the driving forces of me traveling in this way. All right, so let's speak business, let's speak money. So here we're looking at three angles here. I've tried my best to put three things at the same time to give you an idea, a multi-dimensional idea, how big this marketplace is. So if you look at digital health, you're looking at $660 billion industry that is exponentially growing on and on since 2020. And it's just a decade. This is just a 2020, 2030 kind of snapshot of how fast this field is going. All right, so $660 billion around this, and it's also shaping healthcare as we speak. We're leaving the old paradigm of transactional pay for service, kind of fee for service model. We're also leaving the paper-based model. We're also leaving the idea of just transactional, like episodal, just one event diagnosis, then the patient is gone or no show. So we're leaving that type of paradigm, and we're entering a different paradigm, which I will be talking about at a later slide. So staying here. So the other one is the diagonal axis here is the AI in general. And I think this year, since November 2022, we have seen the genesis of generative AI that has been pushed by OpenAI. And we've seen how it has been not only a force to reckon with, but it's definitely shaping the world as we speak, perhaps to the better, perhaps to the worse. We're living on that edge between whether we're losing what we always have known, and are we ready to enter a different world where AI is inevitable, right? So it is a hot topic, and we're living through it day in, day out, right? This is a very conservative number for AI in general. It's going to accelerate because this has been done way before all of the force of generative AI has been pushed. So 136, but I do see double or triple. Okay. The other one is the x-axis, which is the affective computing, which may seem that it's pretty dormant as we speak, but it's really having a high growth rate of 33%. That's really, really high, which is almost in the same approximative growth rate of AI in general, given that it's a sub niche of AI. So affective computing or emotion AI is around $54 billion market industry. And the vertical that we're talking about digital health, the vertical that Patrick was talking about, that the entrance, the barrier of entry is pretty high. It's because of the fact that you are dealing with a high risk kind of industry, by which you're dealing with patients, you're dealing with extremely risky spectrum of treatment and diagnosis and prognosis. And this is not somewhere that you can have the leeway to make assumptions or leeway to actually make erroneous, fatal errors. So this is one of the reasons why, even though it is a big industry, the growth rate is not as speculative or spectacular like the 37.3% growth rate. And I hope that it gives an idea why it is a huge market, but it's not growing as fast. However, since these three are interconnected one way or another, whether it's a pure discriminative AI entering digital health, or you're actually bringing about affective computing to digital health, then please bear in mind that you are entering an interestingly high growth, high return of investment kind of multi-industry spectrum. So I'm gonna break this down, these different axes, these different areas, into this type of how can I say, demands, right? Based on demands and based on needs. So on digital health, we're talking about search and demand for what exactly? That has been going on for the past 20 years is the healthcare IT, of course, prior, but the prominence was the past 20 years, which is EMR, EHR. There are a lot of monopolies going on there. There's also a lot of shortcomings if you are used to interfacing with such software. And then, of course, there is the idea of e-prescribing, and not only prescribing medications, but also prescribing apps. That's something that is still emerging, but it is still an e-prescription model. And then we're talking about mobile and telehealth. And I think we have seen the implementation, whether it's forced or coerced implementation of telehealth during the pandemic, where the person the patient need to interface with their provider via a machine, a device, a handheld device, or a laptop, or a workstation. So this idea of telehealth, of actually having virtual care as an umbrella, has been brewing for some time. And this is not a new thing. It's not just a Big Bang theory here. It has been there. The idea of collecting data during your admission into a healthcare facility, the idea of analyzing this data or making, a little bit of predictive analytics within it, it has been there. And a lot of ripe research and development were derived from this healthcare IT system being kind of mature enough. And I'm talking about the US market at this moment. However, from my travels, I've seen that the Asia Pacific, especially Southeast Asia, they skipped the workstation, they skipped the desktop, so they skipped the web, and they entered directly to the mobile world, which means that healthcare IT for them, for this area, is basically an app. If it's not an app, then why should I have a laptop or a workstation? And it means it is actually a wave by which Asia Pacific is really pushing for a more mobile first. And now, since AI is being highly adapted in this area, it's going to be mobile first, AI first. So for digital health, this AI mobile first kind of idea will be, probably should I say, way more conductive to be implemented here in this region than in another region of the world. All right, so that is just a tangent. The other one is the desire to curb healthcare costs while reducing wastage and errors. So the errors are different type of errors. Could be administrative errors, non-clinical errors, clinical errors, medical errors, or even technological errors. So, and I'm just really putting things into a very small bucket here. Please don't mind me on that. But these are errors that could be within the continuum of care. And then there are a lot of wastage, whether that is a redundancy, replication, multiple data entry. It could be like, for example, one wastage that could be foreseen, but a doctor jotting down notes while talking or diagnosing, for example, the primary care provider diagnosing the patient simultaneously. That's a wastage because they're neither doing this nor doing that. They're multitasking, and that's not optimal for a care provider to do. For example, the curbing of healthcare costs in the US, especially, it's a very staggering, interestingly expensive industry, by which it has this kind of a weight, not only on the facility, not only on the patient, but also in the government system as well. So the value-based care continuum is an initiative that has been pushed at least for 10 years, been pushed, and this is why this type of innovation, digital health, has been having some form of driving factor or driving force. The other one is rising prevalence of chronic diseases, and I'm going to talk about that in the landscape slide, and also aging population, especially in the West. In the West, there is a high aging population, elderly population on the rise. And with that being said, with aging population means that there are a growing need of elderly care. But since we're gonna have lower number of youth versus elderly people, we're having discrepancy right there. Okay. The other one is, let's look at the x-axis, but this time I'm going to zoom into health. So affective computing in health, not as a general, because if you look at general, you're going to see marketing, you're going to see customer service, you're going to see entertainment, serious games, for example. Gaming has a lot of affective computing, by the way, but it's out of scope per se at this moment. So when you're looking in health, we're looking at the search and demand for empathic gadgets and processes, something that actually has this form of user experience that is empathic. And that's one of the reasons why I'm very drawn to UX experience, very drawn to design thinking, because it is the fuel, the vessel to make sure that we're creating empathic digital health. The other one is personalized customer care. And when I say customer care, I'm trying to paint you an idea of having a customer care for patient care. You take care of your patients from 0 to 1, from admission to discharge. And that is the value-based care continuum that is really pushed in the North American region, especially the US. The tools beyond the clinic, because there's shortage of personnel, whether we like it or not. We don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough providers to cater to the whole populace. So because of that physical, tangible shortage, it is very helpful to and also pragmatic to understand that this is already an opportunity to bring about digital tools that can help the primary care provider or even the specialist. Now, let's look at AI, but more on the health again, the same way. And we're looking at faster and more accurate diagnosis. And this has been pushed by the big medical device companies around the world. Medtronic, for example, Philips, GE, they've been really pushing forward on this idea of making a faster diagnosis and more accurate and more robust and also more cloud-based, like they can interoperable, so it can be pushed from one area to the other, but pushed from one provider to the other, one institution to the other, that is in a seamless manner. And also the streamlining health admin processes, which is the back end of running a hospital, running a healthcare facility, and to make sure that there are AI assistants, there are automation, there are, how can I say, a lesson of a cognitive load, because you cannot, I've dealt with this. I've managed a hospital that had at least 50,000 devices, small, big, all the type, all the risk level, and there was no process in sight. And it was a mayhem. It was a nightmare to manage all of these things going on with different catering to different needs, risk levels, and technical difficulties, and also usage. So streamlining, sorry for the voice, so the noise. Okay, so streamlining health admin process is also a need for AI. So we're talking about non-clinical apps right here. Personalized medicine. When I say personalized medicine, we're talking about genomics, we're talking about phenotypic data, we're talking about looking at it in a holistic manner in order to have an individualized treatment plans, individualized diagnosis, and also making sure that we are not having one size fits all approach, which is detrimental in medicine to have that. So personalized medicine is a whole new ballgame. It's very huge, but at the same time, extremely tedious, because you're trying your best to cater to different verticals. So affective computing, AI in health really help in this. So now we segment to how. And how, I'm going to make it on a 1-2 step. If you guys know the song, that's a reference. Step 1 is to first identify the landscape. If you do not know with what you're dealing with, it's very difficult for you as a VC to discriminate between different startups or different projects. And if you are a healthcare executive, it's very hard to discriminate between different innovative vendors, for example. So identifying the landscape is highly, highly important. In 2 aspects, in the medical aspect, in the healthcare aspect, and also on the trends, in the innovation aspect. And I will do my best to put it here for you. Maybe for later, you can jot it down and, marinate it. So these are the most prevalent kind of clusters, medical clusters, by which affective computing could be very, very useful and highly valuable and highly viable and feasible as well. So we're talking about number 1, mental health and substance abuse, and that is one of my long-term research and development. So we're looking at anxiety, stress and disorders, depression, complex and PTSDs, pain management. If you guys saw my early post on LinkedIn, pain management, to actually understand what is pain, it is highly subjective. So to quantify pain and to actually take care of pain on a long-term basis requires something that is beyond what we have right now, which affective computing as a technology, as an AI sub-niche, can really respond to that need. The other one is neurodivergence and neurodegeneration. So when you say neurodegeneration, we're talking about neurocognitive decline, but also pure brain health disorders. And this is, again, the gap. This is the knowledge gap. This is where we need a lot of work. And to actually uncover this landscape, this sub-landscape, we need to have the tools. We need to have the tools to actually understand what we're dealing with. So I have a lot to say about this part, especially the mental health and the neurodivergence and neurodegeneration. But to put it on a concise manner, we have just labeled these specific disorders, challenges, conditions, use any label at this moment. But then we do not know enough, because this is some of them are rare, some of them are require longitudinal or continuous data sets or continuous observation. It requires kind of individualized, precise kind of interventions. So there are challenges within these, but effective computing as a technology within a digital health system can really facilitate this highly needed domain. The other one is assistive and elderly care, which is a combination of mental health, neurodivergence or neurodegeneration, non-communicable diseases and malnutrition. And we're talking about NCDs, we're talking about chronic illnesses that is burdening not only the populace, but also burdening the system, the healthcare system, whether that is the US system or, for example, in the European system, where it is a national healthcare system. For example, NHS in the UK, this is really draining not only on making sure that we have specialists, not only making sure that we have a long-term care, quality of care, and not only that, but actually diagnosing, treating, prognosing, and intervention. All of these really is a burden, not only for the government, but also for the citizenry. So reproductive sexual health is almost in the same level as the brain health disorders, where it's a bit of a gray area, because we know something, but we don't know enough. So that is a knowledge gap by which we can develop tools to kind of enlighten that landscape. So I hope this is a good GPS so far. All right. The other landscape that is really important to understand, where I invite you to kind of mesh these together, stitch them together, is the healthcare trends in terms of innovation. So we already know about telehealth. It has been around, but now it's more of a mainstream. We have virtual care, apps that connect you to doctors, for example. And in consumer health, which is something that is, you're not a patient yet, but you're a seeker of healthcare, whether that is more of a wellness, whether that is more of a health coach, life coach, or actually getting diagnosed and entering a more of a formal treatment plan. And I do play a lot on consumer health, and that is one of the product line of Gina Health, which is Paradigm, that's dealing with consumer health. IoT-enabled medicine, we're talking about sensors, bring about new sensors, bring about portable sensors to deal with interconnecting medical devices, medical wearables, dealing with the virtual care, making sure that there's a continuum of value-based care. The other one is mobile health platform, whether that is actually having an interface, dealing with your provider, for example, within the admission or outside. And the other one is virtual augmented mixed reality, VR, AR, and MR or XR. This is a whole new ball game, out of scope for today, but it's just a teaser telling you that it's going to be pushing consumer health forward, also pushing for a mobile health platform forward. All right. How are we doing so far? Okay. Step 2, identifying the tools. Now that we understood the landscape, what is up and rising, what is becoming a rising star, and what are actually the most prevalent diseases out there, right? Now we look at identifying the tools. All right. There's a famous saying where if you have a hammer, you're just looking for a nail. You're just gonna, but here we're talking about diversity of tools. Now we're going to talk about one tool, and that is affective computing. And the affective computing, we're dealing with a sub-niche that is very much connected to human-machine interaction. Affective computing and human-machine interaction, the other one connects the other connects the other, right? So affective computing is an interdisciplinary field. It's not something that is one thing. It requires diverse thinking, requires creative problem solving, and it also requires a lot of expertise together. So it's not a one man, one woman job, okay? So in interdisciplinary field of affective computing, we're talking about computer science, biomedical engineering, psychology, cognitive science, neuroscience, philosophy, and art, all blended together. And it's a very exciting in a field in its infant stage, because it's emerging, and it's emerging on its own, but it's always connected or stitched to human-machine interaction. So HMI and human-machine interaction whether it is a standalone in different various clusters of industry. But if you look at it on the healthcare, once you have human-machine interaction, you're talking about virtual care, you're talking about pushing digital health forward, not only as a process, but actually as a platform, as an ecosystem. So it's very interesting interconnectedness. All right, so let's pull a little bit and give a little bit of merit to how affective computing came about. Because the word affective, and in computing we understand, we're looking at computer science, we're looking at technology, and we're talking about something that is machine readable, right? But then affective computing as a theory has been ignited by Tompkins on 1962. So that is the time where affective theory came about in the psychology field, you see? So in affective theory, I am no expert of this, so I'll do my best to define it as simply as possible. There are two aspects. There's emotions and there's affects. In the emotion, it's a complex phenomenon involving affect, cognition, behavior, and physiology. We feel it, we know what it is, but we cannot necessarily pinpoint it. That's the beauty of emotion. Is it an affect? Is it an emotion? That's where the blending happens, and that's where affective theory is always in a continuous study and refinement in the psychology field, right? So now, when you jump into the idea of affects, we're talking about non-linguistic forces, where it is a bodily response triggered by some sort of stimuli. And for example, it could be images, sounds, smells, taste, and touch. And we're talking about the five senses. Please remember that we're talking about the affects by five senses, and these are non-linguistic. So LLM, all right, ChatGPT, LLM has been a breakthrough in the linguistic aspect of AI. Affect computing is a breakthrough in the non-linguistic aspects of AI. All right. So affects as non-linguistic can be conscious or unconscious, can be expressed or repressed, and can be contagious. It's a very interesting idea of contagion, which means that an affect that you have can be mirrored by another human in front of you, whether through an interface, human-machine interface, or maybe in real life. The other one also, please remember, it's not static. So it's a very dynamic kind of element, parameters, not unidimensional, and not time anchored. So these are important kind of like a PS on the idea of affective theory. All right. So the matrix, so I tried my best to distill affective theory, which is a very complex psychology paper, and I'm in no shape or form to understand it fully. But what I've tried my best is to distill it as an engineer. I had to distill it in a way that is tangible, that is could be understood. So we got plus, minus, and the squiggle right there, the approximate is neutral. So on the plus, it has been identified enjoyment, enjoy, interest, and excitement. Okay, this is this theory specifically. And in minus or negative emotion, negative affect, sorry, is anger, rage, disgust, the smell, the state, distress, anguish, face, terror, shame, humiliation. And in the neutral is surprised and startled. So think about it for a moment. Just have a kind of a thought experiment how nurses, how healthcare providers, caregivers actually are able to exercise affective theory, the matrix right there, by looking at their elderly patient or looking at their fellow patient, right? They see it, they react to it, and they do their best to facilitate it, right? So that is a beautiful thing. Obviously, it's pretty much distilled, but then there is another concurrent theory that happened to be within the years of 1962, which is 1965. And Ekman brought about basic emotions. We're talking about anger, fear, disgust, surprise, happiness, and sadness. These are very discrete, specific emotions. So he disregarded the idea of affect and emotion being separate. The idea, the theory here is they're all one thing, which is emotion, and then it's basic emotions in all cultural and humans across the board. That is the idea. Okay, so they're discrete. They're rapid responses that involves facial expression, physiology, subjective experience, and action tendencies. All right. So to react to a certain emotion, fear, that's a reaction to something that is unknown, for example. disgust, something you don't like, something of that nature. So effect is the game here. And this is, how can I say, this is igniting another form of possibility, which is basically making sure that we're looking at the senses. So we're looking at the five senses, the touch, the smell, the taste. Especially, there are two things that are, there's a lot of progress, which is the visual and the acoustic. And when we say acoustic, it's not only listening, but also vocal. I'm just going to use this interchangeably, IO acoustic, whether you're talking or whether you're listening. So the visual part is, there's a lot of work, interesting work in the visual part, especially in the AI part, that was able to be transferred into affective computing within the psychology field, right? But please, this is a PS. The existing AI models I'm going to show you from here on out are more based on neurotypical affective signals. When I say neurotypical affective signals, it means the common average brain morphology, which is neurotypicality. It's not catering to neuroatypicality, which is neurodiversity. We're talking about ASD, autism spectrum disorder, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and all other neurodiverse conditions. Please bear that in mind. So the AI models that are shining in its glory as of the moment are dealing with neurotypical. So they may or may not function properly in high accuracy or in a decent accuracy for certain conditions. So that is a disclaimer, and I had to put it. All right, so let's look at some of the existing algorithms, models, AI models for emotion detection. Please understand that most of the algos, most of the models have been pre-trained based on Ekman's 6 basic emotion model, all right? Most of them. So if you see a certain kind of facial recognition, emotion detection kind of, system, there's a high chance that it is really based on the 6 basic emotion corpus of Ekman, okay? So, for example, this is an existing framework. You can find it on GitHub, and it is recurrent neural network, LSTM type, for emotion detection using Ekman's 6 basic emotion corpus, and it is one of the highest in terms of accuracy of 0.6070 on the macro F1 score. So it has this confidence level by which it can detect sadness, anger, disgust, contempt, surprise, and fear, which are based on Ekman's basic model. You can play around with this if you're a vendor or if you're a developer. Check out the reference and see about how it is able to do such identification. But then, is it enough in this realm? Of course not. We still need to refine. We still need to make sure that we understand the other aspect of affect theory. But is this good for now? Yes, it is good for now. Is it promising that we're pushing for potential low risk kind of emotion detection systems, AI systems that can be used in different aspects in the healthcare spectrum? Yes. All right. The other one is the combination of OpenCV and DeepFace that has been developed by Facebook for real-time facial emotion recognition. And this is catering to the idea of having a real-time video content or webcam or some, live stream, for example. And it is able to detect the 6 motion corpus based on the way your face moves. So that is, again, a possibility to use it in different use cases, but not necessarily dealing with neurodiversity. Okay, again, exclusion, by which you can be able to start detecting specific emotions, for example, potential of having heightened anger or potential aggression, or also can be used for corporal wellness, and also a possibility to enable this within teenagers, for example, or HR. These are certain aspects that you can use on a kind of a transversal, but in the healthcare sphere, this should be a little bit pushed a little bit further in terms of refinement so that we can actually lower the risk of having mishaps on understanding what is what, okay? So it is a possibility to push this further. Yes, the idea, the feasibility of actually having a real-time live stream that is being able to detect the basic emotional corpus and being able to be, pushed forward and interpreted, that is already not bad for now, not bad. All right. The other part is the acoustic, as I've mentioned earlier, which is the I/O part. And in the I/O part, we're talking about, talking about voice analysis for emotion detection. So we're using voice instead of the computer vision, for example. And here we're having a loan word from Bag of Words, if you guys know about Bag of Words, which is also a feature embedding algorithm. But this is a bag of audio words, BOAO, feature embedding. So it's going to bring about snippets of specific pitch, tone, volume, speed of a certain voice. And that is camouflage, that is like connected by RNN, recurrent neural network, to make sure that there is a form of memory, okay, to actually remember the sequence of memory. Not very precise like LSTM. I'm sorry, I'm gonna get a little bit techie. Not as precise in terms of dependency, memory dependency of an LSTM model, but it's good enough to at least within an episode, you'll be able to detect some form of emotion, again, basic emotion pre-trained model, again, Ekman, and also a form of intensity and urgency. Not as accurate as we want, but at least it is a possibility to start detecting on the first tier of low risk emotion detection. All right, so that is more of an automation per se. So in the voice, we're looking at acoustic parameters, and in the acoustic parameters, there is the basic ones that are fundamental, which is the pitch, the tone, the volume, and the speed. But then on the advanced part with harmonics, the jitter, the shimmer, the spectral slope, the spectral centroid, whether the voice is a bit like this, or a little bit fried, a little bit slow, a little bit jetty, or it's very, very exciting. It's amazing. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. You see, so this way of me talking, I'm so hyper. I love it. I love it. I am a bit sad. I'm a bit depressed. So it's a possibility to bring about a low risk first tier, first level of voice detection for potential depression, for potential stress or anxiety attack, for potential bipolar in terms of hypermania, hypomania, for example. So putting a certain kind of a cluster for you or an imagination for you to understand that the way I speak can determine a little bit, at least on these parameters, what type of effect am I having, what type of emotion, attitude, intensity, urgency, and sincerity. Of course, this is room for opportunity to have research development and also for commercial marketplace. All of these are still in infant stage, and it's a beautiful beginning for potential viable softwares or viable algorithms out there. All right, so do I still have time? Please let me know, okay? So what I've been obsessed with for the past few years, I've been obsessed with this Gina, and I cannot let it go. The idea is with Gina Engine is a multi-model affective AI system. So what you've seen earlier are all almost, just give me a moment, they're almost unimodal, so one modal, and mostly are taking care of certain feature and in hyper focus on one feature. What we expect from the output of Gina, which is very fieldwork based, is to actually bring about multimodal in terms of effective, not only in the acoustics, not only in the vocal, not only on the computer vision, but to actually understand other modalities that are encompassing and making sure that there's an affect. So instead of focusing on the Ekman 6 basic corpus that has been the driving force for so many frameworks and libraries out there, what we're looking at here is the affect theory, which is a little bit continuous, a little bit, how can I say, more complex in terms of bringing about different parameters together, blending together, making sure that we have a more accuracy and robustness in supporting mental health providers dealing with different different people. So that is the engine of Gina that has been taking most of my brain cells. All right, so the client tool that will bring about where Gina is going to be hosted first is Paradigm. And Paradigm is a digital twins refined matching of provider and healthcare consumer to make sure that there is a digital twin. What is a digital twin? It's out of scope here, but just a little tangent is to make sure that we are having another digital physiological multimodal data set that is kind of personifying you in the digital realm, so that if there is any form of personalization, any form of optimal support network in terms of mental health needs, that could be used on it instead of just assuming or putting, there are a lot of lacks. So you just take one data point, second data point, maybe 3 months, 6 months, and then jotting down a potential treatment plan. So we don't want to do that. What we want to have is a continuous, optimum mental health support network. And to make sure that possible, there must be something that the core engine should be more refined and more truthful to how psychology, neuropsychology, and how affective theory is together. So that is my obsession. All right, so let's go here to use cases out there. As you can see, there is a plethora, but still on the infant stage. It's gonna go faster and faster the more we develop non-linguistic models, right? So for example, if you look at this TikTok, I don't know if you guys have seen this little robot, but this little robot is a companion that behaves like almost like a pet, but a little bit more dynamic than a pet, because it kind of requests things, can have an effect kind of communication and transaction with the user. For example, it's requested you to pet it, and it will be happy on its way of movement. And that is a little robot. That is one of the robotics, right? It's a versatile one. You can play with it. So what is the point of having this? Companionship. Example, we got loneliness. That is a possibility of companionship, helping ASD kids to become a little bit more apt to understanding emotions, because that is one of the hardest parts of autistic children, is to detect what is the exact emotion from the facial recognition. That is one of the hardest things, because they see so many data points. They see so many movement in the face, even micro expressions, that it is hard for a neurodiverse person, especially with ASD, to detect what type of emotion has been transmitted from the person in front of them. Okay, so that is one of the biggest possibilities with affective computing in a digital health, is to make sure that there's a lot of companionship, training, and immersion and involvement, user involvement of kids, especially children on developing age, to be understanding how emotions are being transmitted, especially from the facial aspect of things, let alone other modalities, right? So robotics, in terms of robots, instead of only the surgical robots or dealing with companion robots, for example, nursing robots that are moving around the clinics, we also have training robots, and that is affective computing training robots, where they teach emotion and empathy, how to actually understand people. And that is it's highly valuable. I cannot even stress it. The other one is one of the unicorns out there is Affectiva.ai, and they're dealing with an interesting, it's one of the leading actually companies in the affective computing world, especially at this moment. And they are dealing with understanding emotion detection of drivers. Because if you guys, on a layman term, if the person is drowsy, tired, distracted, angry, maybe some form of agitation, there is a tendency to do an action, right? An action in the car, whether speeding, whether a little bit slowing down, derailing, some form of nonchalance, right? So that is the aspect that they're looking at. They're looking at safety, driver safety. So that is an interesting line altogether. It could be used in other things, but because the tool is a strong affective computing tool, they were able to even venture into having the virtual care of ASD children. As you can see here, the demo app right here, it's called Affidexme, and has been launched in Japan. Okay, so it has not been launched in the US, it has been launched in Japan first as a soft launch, there, and then they were able to have their own user testing over there, because in Japan, empathic robotics, empathic AI is more, how can I say, it's more receptive per se. So please check that out. Also, they were able to detect the kid can start understanding their own face from an empathic point of view of facial recognition, emotion detection. As you can see also, love, I cannot read Japanese, but love something. The love robot is a companion for folks who live on their own, and they would like to have a robot going around being silly and being cute, and it is doing the job of companionship. So loneliness epidemic, break it down, something of that nature. The other one is empathy app, and this is more of a software as an interface, not necessarily a robot, for example. And it is a way to actually connect people in different episodes in their lives. For example, dealing with grief and loss. So as you can see here, they are actually helping the person deal with grief in a more individualized manner, which is highly valuable. And to activate that, there is a sauce of user experience, empathy, user empathy, a sauce of affective computing, because you have to deal with different affects so that you can have a reinforcement learning and feedback loop, and obviously a higher user engagement. So you have to make it consumer based, so consumer health. And that is a beautiful example to look into. All right, almost there. Let's just look at the standards and regulations, which is really, really helpful and very important, whether you are an executive trying to innovate or whether you're a VC wanting to choose a certain startup, or whether you are really trying to push for research on this arena. You have to look at EU AI Act. It's not necessarily specific for affective computing, but at least it is an umbrella of what the EU Commission is expecting out of the AI vendors and AI research and developers to bring about. The other one is EU GDPR, dealing with data protection. And it's very, very important because knowledge is power, and you have to treat it wisely, especially when you're dealing with emotion AI, where you're dealing with possibility of exploitation, user manipulation, and other form of potential, harm. The other one, these two are standards, so they're very fairly new, but they're worth looking into, is IEEE standard for affective computing and IEEE standard for brain-computer interface. That is important to look at because this is where we're going in the mesh of human-machine interface, interaction, HMI, affective computing, AI in general, in terms of a tool, transversal tool, and then obviously we're pushing to brain-computer interface. Let me not say neural link, right? So, for example, this is important to look at because they are really starting to become more meshed as we go forward. The other one is very important, is the ethical concern, as I said, because it has a high potential of manipulation, exploitation. Anything to do with affective computing, gamification, dealing with high user empathy, so user experience, has a tendency, has the possibility to manipulate, deceive, direct, push, unpush, influence the user to do a certain action. So that is a burden within for the research and development, for the vendor, to bring about a more of an ethical engine forward. So please remember these pillars that has to be looked at with scrutiny before pushing or soft launching something out there in the wild, because the regulation will catch up whenever there is a high risk, especially in the medical field or digital health. So please look at informed consent and transparency. When you are dealing with data as a good, as an exchange between the user and the system, please understand there must be an informed consent of what is being stored, what is being used, and what is being crunched. Autonomy and manipulation. Please take this with scrutiny as well. Accuracy and validity, respect and dignity. At the end of the day, we're trying to serve and make things better for our patients. So these are pillars that are worth looking at. All right, you made it till the end, and I'm gonna say, aren't you a stunner? So thank you for your attention. I tried my best to make it concise within time, I hope. If there are any questions, feel free to ask.
Thanks a lot. That was brilliant. Thanks a lot. That was really, really cool, really entertaining and really informative. Really enjoyed. I could listen for some hours more, but better we jump directly to the Q&A of Chat.
All right.
Yeah, if there are any questions in the audience, just raise your hand or write in the chat. Otherwise, I would just start with the question on my end to break the ice. In the beginning, you said that I think you were referring to Asian countries that they basically skipped the workstation, right, and skipped directly or jumped directly to mobile. I was wondering, and you said that healthcare became an app. I was wondering, and you see it often when there's digital disruption, right, that the middleman is deleted. Would you say that in the future health, let's call it a market, that there is, when we see the middleman, the doctors as the middleman, that in the future there's just company and patient, and the doctors are, I don't know, working for the companies, that there's more like a company to consumer relationship in this market?
Okay. I wouldn't call the doctors as middlemen because of the inherent knowledge, expertise that are being accumulated on the ground, which cannot be replaced per se, especially when you're dealing with specific cases. So this is a very important part. And also, the more the complex the case, the more it requires a multimodal form of understanding, whether that is diagnosis, prognosis, or intervention. And when we're dealing with intervention, we're already talking about potential surgeries, potential actually touching the body. And that is, even though there are surgical robots, for example, Da Vinci, it still has to be monitored by a human. So in our world of medicine, we cannot just eradicate the doctor per se, but what we can do is reduce the wastage of time, because that's the problem here. The problem is that they waste a lot of time in administrative or some form of redundancy processes. For example, looking at the patient, talking to them, trying to diagnose them, especially primary care doctors, and then they have to jot down on the EMR and the EHR, especially EMR. So that is already a cognitive load. What the AI in general can help is to automate that part so that the doctor can have a 90% at least focus on the patient in order to bring a precise diagnosis and a more timely intervention in terms of episode. So that is from one point. So are we replacing doctors? No, we are augmenting doctors as a practice, as they're in their practice. And if there is something that can be done because it's a low risk, repetitive task, so be it. It can be delegated. So this is the idea behind it. Will it be able to help the specialists to actually cater to more research, cater to actually more rare, complex cases? Yes, because that is one of the burden. The burden is sometimes you really need to focus on a very complex case as for example, a surgeon professor, but you have to deal with all these menial tasks. So that is where AI can be very, very helpful. And the more we go with this, the more we develop and actually have evidence-based products, the more it's gonna become adopted. And from my prediction, the adoption will be from the millennials onward, because tech savviness has been by default since the day they were practicing or studying medicine. So 5 years-ish. That's where you're gonna start seeing it. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Welcome.
Any other questions?
Questions, violent reactions? What's up? Yojis is so silent.
Otherwise, I'll keep asking.
Go ahead.
What I was asking myself, so you were first introducing in a presentation the visual part, right? And then the voice part, so the language. What if you put both together and not just also the touch and everything? So
yes,
will we see in the future one, I don't know, super model that is able to, if we add all the data of someone, to
Right. I mean, it is visible. Like you got two affects, right? You got the visual and you got the acoustic, whether that is voice or listening. That is visible. But then we have to look at the hardware, as we said earlier. You have to also look at the cost of churning all of this data, because the most expensive ones are basically the video and audio, right? These are the most expensive because it really holds a lot of data. So that is one hindrance. So we have to always look at the existing hardware advancements to actually bring about a multimodal, which is, this is a bivariate, right? So two features together, fusing them together to make sure that we can understand. So that is a possibility, but then it's not enough, because affects are not just, for example, visual or the vocal part, the acoustics. You also have, for example, physiological ones. For example, for anxiety disorder, sometimes you have this cold sweat happening, the fast rhythmic kind of breathing. These are affects that are not necessarily easy to pinpoint. You cannot just go to a microphone and start breathing, right? That doesn't make sense. But there are potential sensors that can be pushed to collect this data. And then you have an engine that can collate this data with other affects. Now we're talking about a monster engine that needs a strong cluster. See, and then we go back again to the idea of we need strong hardware to make sure that these algorithms will not crash the machine. So I'm being pragmatic. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Welcome.
Right. Now someone who's has courage to.
I don't have questions from my side because I'm not
me?
basically into healthcare. But today I just saw that Google has launched Gemini, and then they claim it's more powerful than ChatGPT. I'm still trying to process it, but I think there is going to be. I feel like AI in healthcare has a lot of amount of lot of potential, and which has not been explored yet.
Yes. In terms of potential, as we've seen, like there are potential, but then there is a difficult barrier of entry. So now we're talking not only about the technology, we're talking about regulation, and we're also talking about the ethical part, because we're dealing with patients, we're dealing with people. This is not just a casual chat. This is not consumer gaming. This is people with chronic diseases, with multi-chronic diseases and comorbidities. It could be diabetes plus bipolar disorder. It could be cancer with depression and dementia. The combinations, the permutation is really high, because there are a lot of aspects together that are racking up risk upon each other. So entering the field of medicine with AI, with the enthusiasm that AI is having right now, like, oh, we have LLMs, okay, let's bring about. This is why you do not have a big unicorn digital health, nor a big unicorn AI in health, because it has to go through this evidence-based, high-risk vigilance of whether you bringing about benefit or are you diminishing risk, you see? So that is the mentality. It's not only about resistance, like we don't like it. No, it's about the possibility of you misdiagnosing a person, overdiagnosing, underdiagnosing, perhaps even automating a whole clinical care, and bringing about potential of medical adherence to the wrong medication. And for example, in the pain management, you might end up having opioid crisis where the person is addicted to pain medication, you see? So we cannot just go and say, we can automate the pharmaceutical part. We can make an app that can send this automated notification to all pharmacies with the patients. See what I mean? Technically, it's feasible, but on the groundwork, you're dealing with a lot of risk of people getting, unalived or misdiagnosed, undiagnosed, something of that nature. So risk is very, very important. So yeah, and this is why regulations within healthcare is also important, because it's better to limit earlier so we can make sure that we have a liability of risk. So yeah.
Yeah, and talking about this, I previously worked on a project which was like detecting if a person has a Parkinson's disease or not. I think that's
There we go.
everyone
Mm.
had. I'm pretty sure everyone has done this project at least once in their lifetime to get their hands
Yes,
on AI. And the
shaking
most
part. Yeah.
Yeah, the most challenging thing for me was there were a lot of missing values, and still I had to train algorithm really accurately in such a way that even though there were missing values, the AI model she had to fill it up based
Hmm.
upon the
There we
other
go.
data characteristics. And
Yes,
it was nice to do it, but in reality, this is a bit risky, right? Like that's a very
yes.
simple example, but there are a lot of risks.
Because you're interpolating, you're
Yeah,
filling the gaps.
yeah.
Yes. You're filling the gap of a longitudinal continuous data set. Oh, we're gonna get techie. Sorry. Tech jargon. Here we go. It's like when it comes to neurodegenerative brain health disorder or any form of the prevalent, remember the landscape that I put earlier? In those, you really need longitudinal data set, continuous data set. And that is the whole point of precision medicine initiative, is to be able to have this richness of data to the point that we can have a data lake of a specific chronic disease, that we can actually bring about algorithms that can train on this authentic, rich data lake. That is the whole initiative of precision medicine by the government of the US. But then it's so hard to bring it in reality because in the real world, you have heterogeneous populace, different ages, different races, different working background, different environmental factors, different physiological factors, different biological factors, biodata, genomic factors, phenotypic, and also add on this all is dealing with affect. So different response to different, stimuli. So imagine all of that. So it is a beautiful in paper, but then when it comes to this type of precision medicine or this big umbrella words, it is wise for someone who's a research and developer or a vendor or an executive to take a vertical and do it well, like contribute to it as much as you can, because it will be connected to someone else's work somehow in a state of, yeah.
Yeah, but I also remember the days when we were all waking up in the morning, looking at the data of Corona, how many people are that getting affected every day? What's the graph of second wave or third wave? There were days when AI was like really useful to us, and I feel like even before ChatGPT during the Corona period, people started realizing how AI is super important in healthcare just because of these
Yes.
predictions.
Yes, it has been well known that it is a possibility of growth to actually improve the quality of healthcare delivery way before OpenAI. And in the world of healthcare, AI, OpenAI is a, how can I say, it's a mainstream kind of buzz, because in the medical field we had different words for it. For example, statistical learning. So that's that was my graduate work. Statistical learning models, you see?
Yeah.
You're not dealing with long, big data, but we're dealing with specific data that is rich because you're dealing with specific tiny disease within a chronic, So that is what, these are words, right? But when you're dealing with medicine, the language, the lingo changes because the focus is not necessarily on the tool. The focus is in the research question or on the chronic disease or the problem that you're dealing with. Hence the landscape that I showed earlier. It's very important to pinpoint what you're doing. So yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you,
and
Matt.
I really hope in future we have many startups or companies with AI in healthcare.
Yes, it is going there. As you can see, as you guys saw in the Y part, right? It's a 660 billion industry for a reason, because there is a lot of push from different sides with different ripe stage, right? When I say ripe, it could be mature enough to be commercial, but it could be very early research, right? But there is a lot of push from different aspects. The whole point is that the way to navigate is to search by disease or by condition. And there you're gonna open a whole plethora of what's going on with the AI within that disease. That's how medicine is basically kind of what do you call that? Organized in a sense, which is not the same as the pure tech world, right? Tyson, would you consider audio transcription into text as a form of modality? Text to audio to text is an affect as well. It's a tool. Brilliant presentation. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you too. Also, thank you. Thank you for highlighting how most of the mainstream solutions only cater to neurotypical cases. Yes, it was an important disclaimer because I am in no business to make this like the end all be all, but it is very important to understand that these models, the pre-trained, because most of these are supervised learning models, by the way, they're not unsupervised. They're not going around non-labeled. These are labeled because it is a safer way to do it this way than to go about and start clustering whatever to whatever, you see? So that is what very important part. The pre-trained model of Ekman six basic emotion corpus, which is the core model, and everything else is making sure that this model is actually working, you see? So RNN is chosen, LSTM is chosen to make sure. So these neural networks are used to make sure that the core model can facilitate the incoming data, you see? But at the core of it, okay, I'm not discriminating, but at the core of it, it's still a pre-trained model based on these 6 basic frameworks, right? So the breakthrough that we have to do on affective computing is to go a little bit semi-supervised, a little bit risky. Can we actually start to understand something beyond what we have? And also the idea that we only have 6 fundamental emotions, that is also questionable. Why? Because it's from the 1960s at that time. Neurotypicality, neuroatypicality, neurodivergence, neurodegenerative, neurocognitive decline was not something that was used in the mainstream in sciences. So we're entering an interesting simultaneous parallel world where AI is bringing about, ChatGPT brought about this crazy exponential knowledge graph, like knowledge bases in the finger of your fingertips, right? You can ask it anything and it's going to tell you. That's linguistic. The other one is non-linguistic, where we're going to start understanding how ASD works, how dyslexia work, how ADHD work, how do they recognize faces, how do they respond, what are the affects, for example. So yeah, it's still work in the works, and I'm pretty excited.